raised. I find the juror remains indifferent, and I hope you all had a good weekend. We're continuing with the testimony in the trial this morning. When we take a morning recess, I'd like you folks during the recess to talk amongst yourselves as to whether you think we should sit tomorrow. They're anticipating a snowstorm starting sometime in the morning. And I suspect, at least according to the broadcasts that I've seen, that getting to work may not be a problem in the morning. Getting home may be a significant problem. That is, they're talking about the storm building up midday and continuing through the afternoon into the evening. And that leaves us a couple of options. One is ignore the storm and let's sit for the day and get some testimony in. The second is perhaps to sit for half a day, 9 to 1. But that could end up putting you all right in the middle of the blizzard trying to get home. And the third option would be to cancel the session for tomorrow and hope that the storm passes and we can be here Wednesday morning. So I'd like you folks, I'd like you to have some input into how you think we should proceed and talk about that during the morning recess. And if there's a consensus among you, I'd like to hear it. But let us turn to the testimony. We had finished a witness on Friday, and we have a new witness to start today. Commonwealth.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth calls Trooper Paul Aten.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give this court and jury in the issue now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. I'll call the officer.
May I begin, Your Honor?
Please, Mr. Hagan.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Paul Aten, A-T-E-N. I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police.
How long have you been a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police?
5 years.
And prior to that, sir, what is your educational background?
High school diploma, police officer for the Boston Housing Police, full-time police academy at the Plymouth Police Academy, then the full-time State Police Academy.
And can you describe, if you would, Trooper Aten, what your experience has been at the Massachusetts State Police? In other words, after you started, what particular areas have you been assigned to and what duties you've had?
I've been assigned to the road for the entire 5 years in field. I was in the Springfield Barracks for about 4 years, and now I'm assigned to the Millbury Barracks.
So I'm calling your attention now to a particular date, that being June 21st, the year 2013. We're at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Where were you working at that time, sir?
I was assigned to the Springfield Barracks, working the 91 area out there.
What was your shift, if you recall?
The evening shift from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.
So I'm calling your attention now, Trooper Aten, to about 4:55 p.m. in the afternoon. Did you respond to a call to assist in a certain incident?
Yes.
What was the nature of the incident that you were responding to?
There was a 3-car crash on I-91 northbound in Longmeadow with reported possible injuries.
And based upon that call, sir, did you respond to that scene?
Yes.
May I approach your witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Trooper Aten, I'm just going to show you what appears to be an overhead satellite map. Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate representation, again, a satellite image of the area of Route 91 that you've started to discuss now, sir?
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer the photograph of the next number exhibit. It's a satellite photograph.
Is there any objection?
Without objection.
All right, thank you. Is that 204?
Yes, sir.
Just placing exhibit 204 on the screen, sir. Can you tell us what we see on the screen, what's depicted as far as major landmarks in that area, sir?
It's Interstate 91 at the Massachusetts and Connecticut border. The Connecticut River and Six Flags is in the picture as well.
And the dotted line that I'm going along here, is that the Massachusetts-Connecticut border?
Yes,
And I believe you indicated that there was a call for a 3-car accident at about 4:55 p.m. on Interstate 91. Is that the area that I've moved the pen on here, sir?
yes.
Do you know about where the accident happened?
It was around the 2.1 mile marker in Long Meadow.
And can you point out the approximate location on that map, sir? And that's a touch screen, so you should be able to make a mark.
Somewhere in that area.
Now, Trooper, upon your arrival, what, if anything, did you notice about the traffic conditions?
I believe it was a Friday afternoon, typical heavy traffic. By the time I arrived, the 3 vehicles were moved over to the breakdown lane, and there were 2 troopers on scene.
Describe, if you would, Trooper, what, if anything, you did upon, well, first, when you arrived on scene and 2 troopers were already there, the cars were to the side, what, if anything, did you notice about the cars?
Just observed damage to the vehicles. Approached the other troopers to see what I could assist with.
And what did you do next, sir?
Trooper Winters had myself and Trooper Cormier, who were on scene, assist with doing the inventory of the middle vehicle.
Now, the middle vehicle, sir, did you have any indication as to whether or not the driver of that vehicle had been transported to the hospital, or was being transported to the
The ambulance arrived on scene at some point during that. She was getting transported to the hospital. So at that point, there was no one to take custody of the vehicle. So the vehicle had to be towed and has to be inventoried by policy.
So describe that, if you would, for the jurors. When a car needs to be towed, what is meant by an inventory policy?
When a vehicle needs to be towed and the operator, the owner, cannot take care for it, the vehicle needs to be inventoried by our policy. It's to protect the vehicle and its contents, protect us as well as the tow company from someone making false accusations that we caused damage to it or stole something from the vehicle, and also to protect the public from any dangerous items that could be left in the vehicle.
And Trooper, are you aware of the identity of the operator of that vehicle, what that person's name was?
I believe it was Jaylene Diaz Ramos.
And was Ms. Ramos, to the best of your knowledge, again, based upon what you observed at the scene and your decision to inventory, was she alone in the car, the only occupant?
Yes, I believe so.
And she was the driver, to your understanding?
Correct.
Now, based upon what you've described, Trooper, you performed an inventory search of Ms. Diaz Ramos's motor vehicle, is that correct?
That's correct.
Describe how the inventory search took place, where you searched first, and what you found.
Just inventory the vehicle. We always do. There was 2 of us doing it, so we each took a side of the car.
Who was the other trooper doing it, sir?
Trooper Cormier.
And just for the record, is that C-O-R-M-I-E-A? Cormier?
M-I-E-R.
M-I-E-R, I'm sorry.
Correct.
And describe again the search of the car.
Just an inventory. I'm on the passenger side, he's on the driver's side, inventorying it for whatever's in it, valuables or anything else. If there's a dangerous item, anything like that, needs to be documented. We inventoried the passenger compartment. Inside was personal papers, a camera, a printer. I believe there was a airsoft gun as well as paintballs in the passenger compartment.
So for those who may not know, what is an airsoft gun?
Like a BB gun.
And does it look like a real gun?
Correct.
What, if anything, did you do relative to the trunk of the vehicle of Jaylene Diaz Ramos?
The trunk has to be inventoried as well. Inside the trunk were 2 cases. There was a briefcase and there was also a safe in the trunk. The safe was locked, so that was inventoried as one item, just as a safe. That's how our policy is. We don't open it. Then there was a briefcase, which is an unlocked container. So we opened that. The inside of that must be inventoried as well.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Trooper 8, and I'm showing you a photograph. I'd ask you if you recognize that photograph, sir.
Yes, I do.
And does that appear to be the case that you observed, not the safe that you described that was locked, but the case that you saw in the trunk of Miss Jaylene Diaz Ramos's car?
Yes.
Your Honor, for this photograph is the next number exhibit.
Without objection?
Without objection.
Thank you. Exhibit 205.
Listing Exhibit 205 on the screen, sir. Was this the type of case that you saw in the back? Not the safe, but the other case.
That appears to be the briefcase.
And did you or Trooper Cormier open up that briefcase?
Objection as to what Trooper Cormier did.
I'll rephrase the question.
Rephrase.
Did you open up the case?
Trooper Cormier physically opened the case. I was standing there while he was opening it.
Did you watch him open it?
Yes.
And when he opened up the case, what, if anything, did you observe?
There was a revolver, as well as some 3 rounds of ammunition, as well as some condoms
Were the 3 rounds of ammunition outside of the revolver or inside of the revolver?
outside of the revolver.
Approach witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Trooper Ayton, I'm going to show you first an object and ask you if you recognize that.
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize this to be?
That appears to be the firearm that was recovered from the briefcase.
No. This appears to be the firearm that you saw inside the briefcase that's just been entered a photograph of, sir. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Your Honor, for the firearm is the next numbered exhibit.
Objection, Your Honor. No chain of custody has been established.
I'll see you at sidebar.
Trooper, I'm also showing you what appear to be 2 items. Do you recognize those, sir?
Yes.
And do those appear to be 2 of the 3 bullets that you described finding next to the firearm inside of that case, sir?
Yes.
Your Honor, for the 2 unfired bullets, live rounds, the next number exhibit.
Say no objection.
Exhibit 207.
And Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask that the Boston Police ballistics box in which the 2 items were contained in be marked for identification.
It may. That will be HH.
First witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Trooper, you also indicated that in addition to the firearm that's now been entered in evidence, as well as the 3 live bullets that you recovered from inside of that case, that there were also condoms. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Showing you another photograph, I'd ask you if you recognize that, sir.
Yes.
Does that appear to be a fair and accurate representation of that case with the gun and bullets removed, but with the condoms still remaining?
Yes.
And that's a fair and accurate representation of the item that you saw that day, June 21st, 2013.
Yes.
Your Honor, for the photograph is the next number exhibit.
Without objection.
Exhibit 208.
Exhibit 208 on the screen. Those are the condoms that you observed inside of the case, sir?
Yes.
And the gun and bullets, where was that located inside the case, if you recall?
I don't recall. They were somewhere inside that case.
Somewhere inside this case here.
Yes.
Trooper, what, if anything, did you do when you observed the firearm and bullets?
I believe I had Trooper Cormier get me latex gloves from one of the cruisers. I stayed with the firearm. I then,
Why did you stay with the firearm?
you're not going to leave, once you have the firearm, you're not going to leave it alone, unattended. So once I had the latex gloves, I rendered it safe, opened the cylinder, made sure there were no live rounds inside of it. And at that point, I took custody of it.
What did you do with it next, sir?
I took the case with the firearm and all the contents inside of it and put it inside my cruiser and waited with my cruiser with the firearm.
After waiting with your cruiser with the firearm, and did you also have the live bullets as well?
Yes.
What did you do with the item next, sir?
Once the scene was clearing, I left from that scene and headed directly to the Springfield Barracks with it.
Was a certain trooper who responded to the scene assigned to the case, so to speak, and was writing the reports and itemizing the evidence?
Yes, Trooper Winters was the trooper assigned as the primary trooper.
For the record, that's Winters, Trooper Winters.
Correct.
First name Joshua.
Correct.
And what did you do relative to that firearm and those bullets and the case once you got back to the Springfield Barracks, sir?
I brought them to the desk area and stayed with them until Trooper Winters could come and take custody of it.
And ultimately, did Trooper Winters take custody of the firearm as well as the bullets?
Yes.
And what, if anything else, did you do relative to this investigation, sir?
Later in the evening, I assisted Trooper Winters with a follow-up at Bay State Medical Center.
Did you travel to Bay State Medical Center to see a certain individual?
Yes.
Who did you see?
Miss Jaylene Diaz-Ramos.
And were you present when Trooper Winters had a conversation with Miss Diaz-Ramos?
Yes.
And subsequent to that conversation, Trooper Aten, are you aware of whether or not Miss Diaz-Ramos was placed under arrest?
Yes, she was.
Thank you, Trooper. I have no further questions.
Trooper, just a few questions, if I may inquire, Your Honor.
You may.
So, first, just about the gun, and I'm forgetting the exhibit number, but you have no information whatsoever that Mr. Hernandez's fingerprints are on that gun, do you?
No, I do not.
No information whatsoever that Mr. Hernandez's DNA is on that gun, do you?
I do not.
No information whatsoever that any biological evidence whatsoever of Mr. Hernandez is on that gun, right?
I do not.
With respect to the bullets, the second exhibit, same questions. You have no information whatsoever that Mr. Hernandez's fingerprints are on those bullets.
I do not.
No information that Mr. Hernandez's DNA is on those bullets.
I do not.
No information whatsoever that any biological evidence from Mr. Hernandez is on those bullets, right?
I do not.
Question about the inventory search. So, now you're with the state police, right?
That's correct.
And just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, different entity than the Boston Police Department, right?
That's correct.
Now, I want to get your understanding with respect to when you need a search warrant to look into a car. Objection.
Sustained.
You said you did an inventory search, right?
It's an inventory, not an inventory search.
It's not your view that you needed a search warrant to look in that car, correct?
That's correct.
There was an accident on the highway.
Correct.
Somebody was injured.
Correct.
She was still alive, though.
That's correct.
She was transported by ambulance.
Correct.
And you did not feel that you needed a search warrant to look into the car.
Sustained.
You didn't seek a search warrant to look at the car.
Objection.
No, you may answer that.
Did not.
You searched the unlocked briefcase inside the car.
Inventoried it, yes.
And when you say inventory, that means you opened it up and looked into it, right?
Correct.
All right. So you opened up this unlocked case inside the car,
Correct.
and it was closed, right? You physically opened it.
Trooper Cormier did. I witnessed it.
And neither you nor Trooper Comier saw the search warrant, right?
No.
Questions about the condoms you found in the car. It was your impression that the presence of condoms were inconsistent with a claim that Ms. Diaz-Ramos made, correct?
Sustained.
You made observations about the condoms, right?
Correct.
You found them?
Yes.
Ms. Diaz-Ramos volunteered that she had not had
Hold on,
sex.
I'll see you at sidebar.
In addition to the biological, or the absence of biological evidence, gone to, I haven't asked the question.
Biological evidence? There's been no question about biological evidence.
Overruled.
In addition to the absence of biological evidence, DNA, fingerprints, did you find any other evidence on the scene that connected this gun in any way to Mr. Aaron Hernandez?
Objection.
No, overruled.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of. Might someone else in the trooper department have gotten evidence that day connecting the gun to Mr. Hernandez?
Objection.
Well, the question was your knowledge.
I don't have any knowledge of it.
The first question.
Just two questions, if I may.
You may.
First, Trooper, you're asked questions about whether or not there was any evidence that you're aware of, biological, scientific, otherwise, linking Mr. Hernandez to the gun. Is that correct? You recall those questions?
Yes.
I'm just going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit CC. Do you recognize this to be a calendar of from July 2012 all the way to June of 2013?
Yes.
Does that appear to be fair and accurate?
As far as I know.
And just so we're clear of when we're talking about this motor vehicle accident that you responded to and found the weapon, are we talking about June 21st, 2013?
Objection to the leading.
I'll rephrase the question.
Overruled as to that question.
Are we talking about Friday, June 21st, 2013?
Yes.
How many months from July 2012 is that?
Objection.
You may answer.
12 months.
Now, you were asked a question by Mr. Sullivan during cross-examination about whether or not there was any indication whatsoever linking Mr. Hernandez to that weapon. You recall that question?
Yes.
There was a nickname that was given, wasn't there?
Yes.
Objection.
Well, that answer may stand yes. Let's hear the next question, and I'll listen, Mr. Sullivan, for your objection.
What was the nickname that you heard given by Jaylene Diaz-Ramos relative to that gun?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach her?
You may.
And between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, sir. Kindly call the officer.
Why'd you tell me on the scene? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Trooper Joshua Winters. Winters.
Are you a Massachusetts State Police trooper?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police?
5 years, sir.
What is your educational background?
I graduated from Westfield State College with a master's degree,
In what?
criminal justice.
Would you describe, Trooper Winters, what your experience is with the Massachusetts State Police, meaning what units or areas you've been assigned to since you started about 5 years ago?
Upon graduation in March of 2012, I was assigned to the State Police Sturbridge Barracks for break-in period. In June of 2012, I was transferred to Springfield Barracks, where I worked up until this past July. We're now currently assigned to Crime Scene Services in Worcester.
Trooper Winters, I'm now calling your attention to a particular date, that being Friday, June 21st, the year 2013. Were you working that afternoon after 4 o'clock?
I was.
What shift were you working?
The eve shift was scheduled from 3 to 11.
And you said you were stationed at the Springfield Barracks?
That's correct.
Does the Springfield Barracks include Interstate 91, at least as it intersects with the state of Connecticut?
Yes, it includes 91 from the Connecticut line all the way up until Holyoke.
Trooper Winters, calling your attention at about 4:55 p.m. on Friday the 21st of June 2013. Did you respond to a call at that time?
Yes.
What was the nature of the call, sir?
It was a 3-vehicle crash northbound on Interstate 91 in Longmeadow.
How far away were you at that point?
I can't remember the exact location, but I believe about the time of the call was probably somewhere around the barracks area, so it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles.
What was the nature of the traffic that you found as you got onto 91 to respond to the accident?
It was very heavy traffic, which is normal for that time.
Did you eventually get to the scene of the 3-car accident, sir?
Yes.
Just placing on the screen what's been entered as exhibit number 204. Can you see that on your screen, sir?
Yes.
Does that fairly and accurately depict Interstate 91 as the Connecticut crosses the Connecticut border into Massachusetts?
Yes.
And do you know about where the accident happened?
It was in between the 2-mile marker and the 2.2 mile marker, so it was roughly right in the middle.
And Trooper, if you could, with your hand or finger, I believe that's a touch screen in front of you, can you mark approximately where the accident took place?
Just probably right around here someplace.
And just for the record, you're placing the mark about halfway in between where this map, exhibit 204, says Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Longmeadow. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you responded at the scene, sir, were you the first responding trooper?
Yes.
Were any ambulance or any other emergency personnel there yet?
Not yet.
What, if anything, did you observe?
There were 3 vehicles. Well, it was heavy traffic. All the cars were stopped in all 3 lanes, and there were 3 vehicles that appeared to be involved in a crash in the far left-hand lane.
Did the vehicles have damage, sir?
Yes.
How bad was the damage?
I believe the real car had the most damage. The one that I approached first, and then the front 2 had lesser damage.
And describe, if you would, did you have any interactions at the scene with a woman by the name of Jaylene Diaz Ramos?
Yes.
Which car, if any, was she operating, at least as you observed it at the scene?
She was operating the middle car of the 3 cars.
What, if any, observations did you make of Ms. Diaz Ramos as far as injuries or complaints of injuries?
She stated that she had some sort of...
What she stated.
Now, overruled as it relates to physical condition.
What did she state her physical condition was?
She stated she had some neck and back pain, and I believe also a leg injury.
And based upon what she represented, did you request ambulance to arrive and take her to the hospital?
Yes.
And in fact, did an ambulance arrive and take her to the hospital?
Yes.
Calling your attention now to once the ambulance arrived and Ms. Diaz Ramos was taken to the hospital, what, if anything, was done with her car?
Well, prior to the ambulance arriving, after I made sure everybody was not severely injured, and I did request an ambulance, everybody stated that they could still drive their cars, so we moved them from the left lane into the breakdown lane.
That was to allow traffic to continue on 91?
Yes, it's policy of the state police to try to alleviate any traffic hazards, because staying out in the left-hand lane during rush hour traffic on a Friday is dangerous.
Once the cars were moved into the breakdown lane, Trooper, what did you do next?
I personally went back. At this time, I had 2 other troopers with me. I went back and started doing paperwork in my cruiser.
Was that paperwork relative to the accident?
Yes, exchange forms, exchange documentation of people involved, and things like that to give other people involved in the crash information.
Were you still present at the scene when an ambulance arrived to take Ms. Diaz Ramos to the hospital?
Yes.
And did you see that happen?
Yes.
Do you know what hospital Ms. Diaz Ramos was taken to?
She went to Bay State Hospital.
For those who may not be familiar with the area, where is Bay State Hospital?
Bay State is in Springfield. It's right off the highway, off of 91.
After Ms. Diaz-Ramos was taken to the hospital, were you in the general area when her car was inventoried?
Yes.
And would you just describe briefly what an inventory is, at least your understanding?
An inventory is a quick inventory or log of the contents of the vehicle when it's towed, and it protects the contents of the vehicle from any damage. It protects the state police and the tow truck companies for any false claims or things like that, and protects people involved with the vehicle itself from any harm.
At some point while you were present at the scene filling out the paperwork, Trooper Winters, did you receive information that an item was found in the car?
Yes.
Objection. Calls for hearsay.
Well, the answer may stand as far as it goes. The answer is yes.
And based upon the information you received, Trooper, well, let me back up a little bit. As the first responding trooper, was this incident your incident, meaning you were going to be the case officer, so to speak, writing any reports?
Yes.
And additionally, if any charges were going to be filed, would that be up to you as the case officer?
Yes.
And you were filling out paperwork at that time, correct?
Yes.
Based upon the information you received, Trooper, did you then begin an investigation relative to a potential criminal charge?
Yes.
And at some point when you got back to the barracks to continue your paperwork, was a certain item shown to you and submitted to you as a case officer?
Yeah, I had already seen that item at the scene.
Well, tell us about what you saw at the scene.
I saw there's a firearm located in the back of the Toyota that Ms. Jaylene Diaz-Ramos was driving.
And what do you remember about the firearm? Where did you see it? What part of the car?
It was located in a box in the trunk.
I'm just placing on the screen what's been entered as exhibit number 205. Do you recognize that box, sir?
I do.
Does that appear to be the box that you observed the item, the firearm, in the back of Ms. Jaylene Diaz-Ramos' car?
Yes.
What happened next relative to that firearm, in particular what you did with it as a case officer, sir?
At that point, Trooper Aten secured the firearm in his vehicle and was later transported back to the barracks.
At some point, was that item turned over to you, sir?
Yes.
Trooper, I'm going to show you
You may.
Trooper Winters, I'm first going to show you what's already been entered as exhibit number 206. Do you recognize this, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize this to be?
That was the firearm located in the back, in the box that you just showed me.
And do you recall how many rounds of live ammunition were with it?
I think there are 3 rounds.
I'm showing you 2 live rounds. Did those 2 live rounds that have been entered as exhibit 207 appear to be 2 of the 3 that you observed inside of that, sir?
Yes.
And these items, Trooper Winters, were these submitted to you again as the lead case officer on the case?
Yes.
And I have before you, Trooper, what appears to be a plastic bag with certain writing on it. Do you recognize the handwriting on that bag, sir?
Yes, that's my handwriting.
And what is this bag?
That's one of our evidence bags that we use to submit evidence that we find.
And you filled out the content of this evidence bag, the writing on it?
I did.
And is that writing relative to the items I've just shown you, exhibit 206 and exhibit 207?
Yes.
Your Honor, for the plastic bag identified as the handwriting of Trooper Winters, is the next number exhibit.
No objection.
Without objection, that's received.
Just placing exhibit 209 on the screen, sir. Again, that's your handwriting?
Yeah, the top portion is my handwriting. the bottom portion of the chain of custody, I believe, is the handwriting of Trooper Medina, the evidence court officer.
And what was placed in this plastic bag by you?
The firearm in the rounds.
The firearm and the 3 rounds of ammunition?
Yes,
And you filled out all this information, sir?
I did.
Just going over it a little bit, the case number, is that, what is that?
That's generated by our computer system called RAMS. That's what our case management system.
And we have here description of evidence. What's S&W stand for?
Smith & Wesson,
What's .38 stand for?
the 38, the caliber of the firearm.
And we see a number after that. Is that an S number? What does that say?
SN stands for, would be shorthand for serial number.
And at least according to your handwriting, the serial number on the item was what, sir?
212682.
I'm just placing on the screen the butt of the gun of exhibit number 206. And does that number appear to be the same, 212682?
It does.
What, if anything, did you do next with the bag? Was it sealed?
Yeah, it was sealed.
And how was it sealed?
There's that red, there's a back side to that red. You just pull the back off and fold it over.
And that contained both the firearm, exhibit number 206, and 3 bullets, 2 of which are exhibit 207. Is that correct?
Yes.
What was done with the sealed envelope with the gun and the bullets, sir?
It was then, along with another form that we're required to fill out, was submitted into contraband locker.
What is that form, sir?
What was that?
What kind of form was it? The other form you said it would be?
It pretty much has the same exact information on there as on the bag. My information, the information of the case, the contents, chain of custody, things of that nature.
And what, if any, specialized units, to your knowledge, is that item then submitted to?
It's usually submitted to either ballistics or any type of crime scene personnel.
Now, Trooper Winters, calling your attention now to any further investigation you did relative to Ms. Diaz-Ramos. What, if anything, did you do relative to Ms. Diaz-Ramos?
We then went down to the hospital afterwards, and we requested she produce her firearms license to carry.
And did she have a firearms license to carry?
She said she did not.
What was her condition when you went to the hospital? Was she...
She had been released.
She had been released?
Yeah.
What, if any, family or friends did you note were with her, or did you see with her?
There were family and friends. I don't know. I can't remember who exactly, but there were a good amount of family and friends.
And did you, in addition to determining whether or not she had a license to carry, first, what, if any, significance does that have for your purposes investigating the case?
Because that would allow her to carry the gun or not.
She did not have one, at least.
She did not have one in Connecticut nor in Massachusetts.
And did you have further conversation with her at that time in the hospital?
She was. I read her Miranda rights, and she was placed under arrest, and that was the extent of the conversation.
Then was she, after she was placed under arrest, where was she brought, sir?
She was brought back to the Springfield barracks.
Was she booked at the Springfield barracks?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Trooper Winters, I'm first showing you a document with a photograph on it. Do you recognize both the document and the photograph?
I do.
And what do you recognize the document to be?
That's the face sheet of the report that I would have written.
And the photograph there, sir, who do you recognize that to be?
That's of Jaylene Diaz-Ramos.
And other than being a little bit dark and blurry, is that a fair and accurate representation of what Jaylene Diaz-Ramos looked like on Friday, June 21st, 2013?
It is, sir.
Your Honor, for the face sheet with Ms. Diaz-Ramos' photograph, the next number exhibit.
Without objection.
Without objection.
Without objection.
All right, that's received, Exhibit 210.
And Trooper, I'm showing you a little bit more of a clear photograph. Do you recognize the person depicted in that photograph?
Yes, that's Jaylene.
That's Jaylene Diaz-Ramos?
Yes.
The same individual you placed under arrest on June 21st, 2013?
Yes.
Your Honor, for the second, more clear photograph, so next number 2.
Without objection.
Thank you, Exhibit 211.
A trooper, I've placed Exhibit 211. Is that Jaylene Diaz-Ramos?
Yes.
And do you recall how old she was at the time?
I believe she was 19.
When she got back to the barracks after being placed under arrest, did you have a further conversation with her?
Yes.
And based upon the conversation, did you fill out an extensive report?
Yes.
And Trooper, in your report, again, just as far as your investigative mindset, did you make an attempt to contact any friend of hers in particular? Or have her contact a friend?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar.
Do you?
Yes.
And did you include that in your report?
Yes.
And lastly, Trooper, as part of the face sheet that's been entered as Exhibit 210, what was the home address or place where Ms. Diaz-Ramos was from?
Her home address was 95 Carolina Road in Bristol, Connecticut.
Bristol, Connecticut.
Yes.
We have one moment. Thank you, Trooper. No further questions.
Mr.
Good morning, Trooper.
Good morning, sir.
When you handled the gun that's now in evidence, did you, like Mr. Hagan, wear any sort of gloves?
Yes.
And you wore those gloves for a couple of reasons. One was that you didn't want to accidentally get your DNA on the evidence, right?
Yes.
And the second reason is that you didn't want to accidentally contaminate any biological evidence that was already on the gun, correct?
That's correct.
Now, it is true that to the best of your knowledge, I'm asking about the gun still. It is true that to the best of your knowledge, no fingerprints of Mr. Hernandez are on that gun.
Objection.
Were on that gun.
If you know, sir, you may answer.
I believe there weren't any fingerprints found on the firearm.
And to the best of your knowledge, no DNA of Mr. Hernandez is on that gun.
I'm not aware of any DNA being found on the gun.
To the best of your knowledge, no biological evidence of any sort connecting that gun to Mr. Hernandez was present, correct?
That is correct.
Same question with respect to the bullets. That was the second item of evidence that the Commonwealth introduced. To the best of your knowledge, Mr. Hernandez's fingerprints were not on either bullet, correct?
That is correct.
To the best of your knowledge, Mr. Hernandez's DNA was not on either bullet, correct?
That is correct.
To the best of your knowledge, no biological evidence connecting those bullets to Mr. Hernandez was present, correct?
That is correct.
Now, with respect to the accident and finding the gun, I just want to be clear. Now, the car, you said there were 3 cars in the accident, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez was not in any of the cars, correct?
No, he was not.
To the best of your knowledge, no car involved in the accident was owned by Mr. Hernandez.
Yeah, not to my knowledge.
Best of your knowledge, no car in the accident was leased by Mr. Hernandez.
That's correct.
To the best of your knowledge, no car involved in the accident was rented by Mr. Hernandez.
That is correct.
And in fact, the car where the gun was belonged to Ms. Diaz-Ramos, correct?
Yes.
Just one second. Thank you for your time, Trooper, that's all.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Step down, watch your step, please. Commonwealth.
Commonwealth calls Trooper Stephen Lord.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give this court and jury in the issue now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Time to call down, sir.
May I inquire?
Please.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Trooper Stephen Lord, Lord. I'm a trooper of the Mass State Police assigned to the Cheshire Barracks, which is Berkshire County.
And then just for purpose of the record, is that Stephen with a V as opposed to PH?
Yes, with a V.
How long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police, sir?
Since 2000.
And during that almost 17-year career, would you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what areas or units you've been assigned to with the Massachusetts State Police?
I graduated the State Police Academy, 6-month academy in 2000. Spent 3 or 4 years in the barracks in Cheshire, my home barracks. Transferred to the barracks in Lee in 2004, I think, and then transferred to State Police Crime Scene Services in 2008. When I was there for about 7-8 years till 2015. I
Call your attention now.
transferred back to the barracks in Cheshire.
So right now you're currently at the barracks in Cheshire?
Exactly.
I'm calling your attention now to your experience. I think you said about 8 years from 2008 on that you're with the Crime Scene Services of the Massachusetts State Police. Is that correct?
Correct.
Before we get into that, Trooper, what's your educational background?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice from UMass.
Calling your attention now again to your time in the Crime Scene Services of the Massachusetts State Police. What, if any, training did you receive relative to latent prints?
Okay. So this is a 6-month academy back in 2000. You have a very brief overview on basically securing crime scenes and nothing else. So 2008, I transferred into Crime Scene Services. It's basically like a college class. I was assigned to the lab in Springfield. The office is in Sudbury. So for, I don't really recall exactly, but roughly 2 months, I traveled from my house to Sudbury probably 3 or 4 days a week. Textbooks, extra reading, lab work, history of fingerprints, very much like a college class. On the days that I wasn't going out to Sudbury, I would go to my home lab. You're assigned to a training officer. He explains the paperwork, which is the biggest issue. You learn about friction rate analysis, how to do the lab work, how to process scenes, a lot of camera stuff. There's a lot of stuff we do is take pictures.
And how long did that training process that you've described take place?
Like I speculated about 2 months in Sudbury. At a certain point, you're done with that training. You have to take a test to get out of that training in Sudbury. You go back to your lab. You continue your work with your training officer, observing. You start to participate in with processing in the lab, going out to scenes and watching what he does. And then when they think you're ready, you take a proficiency test dealing with fingerprints. When you graduate from that, you're allowed to go out and start doing casework.
And did you ultimately pass the proficiency test you just
did.
described?
I
And
did.
did you also pass that first test you talked about that was even before you could lead into kind of the apprenticeship?
I did. And then once you pass those, you're taking proficiency tests all the time. I think 2 a year, if memory serves. 1 in-house and then 1 from an outside vendor.
Describe what those proficiency tests are like 2 times a year. In other words, do they give you blind samples, or how does that work?
The most confusing part is actually figuring out how they want you to do it, because it's different, not the actual work, but the paperwork aspect of it. But what they're basically doing is giving you a bunch of 10 print cards, which are just fingerprint cards, and a bunch of suspect cards, hypothetical suspect cards. And you just have to go through and either eliminate them as being part of those 10 print cards, those little parts of friction ridges they give you, or individualize them, which just means match them.
And you said that those proficiency tests were given not only by the Massachusetts State Police, but also by outside agencies?
I believe so, yep.
And you passed all of those proficiency tests?
I did.
And sir, calling your attention now to the laboratory itself, I think you said it was a crime scene services unit. Is that what it was? Or what was the name of the unit that you were
Yes,
assigned
crime
to?
scene service section, and my lab was in Springfield, Mass.
And do you know whether or not the Massachusetts State Police crime laboratory is accredited with any national agencies?
I know at the time when they were ASCLD, whatever that means to you, certified, and then towards the end of my time there, they became ISO certified. I mean, I can explain a little bit what that is.
Yes, can you tell us what that is?
I don't have a real great opinion of it because the taxpayers have to pay for this. It's basically an outside vendor comes in and looks at how you handle things as far as your processing and how you handle evidence, everything you do, and then they make suggestions. Whether or not they're good, bad, or indifferent, they're considered to be better than what you currently do, or you have to change to their standards. and then they give you an ISO certification. You pay for that, and every year you pay to be ISO certified. You'll see this ISO certified. It's the same thing.
And ultimately, does ISO and even, I think the other acronym you referred to is ASCLD, American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors, do those agencies do audits of the laboratories on a regular basis?
I believe so.
Trooper, I want to call your attention now to latent print analysis in particular. In the course of your, it sounds like 8-year career in crime scene services, were you qualified to provide what's oftentimes referred to as expert or opinion testimony in the area of latent print analysis?
I was, both in that and photography.
Now, Trooper Lord, I'm going to call your attention now to something called friction skin, friction ridge skin. Can you tell us what that is and where it's found?
I can. This is the basis of fingerprints. It's hard to do without a drawing.
Actually, sir, I do have my first witness drawing.
You may.
I do have an object that will allow you to draw on the screen here.
Okay.
The amount of pressure you put made.
This is pressure. All right. This is going to be ugly, okay? I failed art class. So on the bottoms of your feet and the palm side of your hands, I'm sure you know your skin is different. It has ridges as opposed to being smooth. That's the basis of what fingerprints are. So let's
Actually,
say,
Trooper Lord, if I may, just place something on the screen and I'll mark for identification only at this time, right?
Aye.
Trooper, I'm going to place, just to avoid you having too much pressure, having to draw too much with your artwork, I'm going to place exhibit II on the screen, and at any time if you want me to, as you're explaining, to remove it and you'd rather draw instead.
yeah, let's slide it out of there for right now. And then
Slide
we'll
it
put
out.
Yeah, we'll put it on in a minute. So before I even start this, there's a couple things. Television has kind of messed up the whole fingerprint thing. Everybody thinks everything you touch, you leave a fingerprint. It's not even remotely true. Okay, the conditions have to be pretty good in order to leave a usable fingerprint. Keep that in mind. And fingerprints have no time. So, you see those movies where one guy's holding something, and then he throws it to the other guy, and he catches it, and he's like, now your fingerprints are on it. That's completely a misnomer. It's not accurate. Both their fingerprints could be on it, neither of their fingerprints could be on it, or somebody's fingerprint could be on it from 10 years ago.
Trooper Lord, I just want to back up a little
Sure.
bit. Again, you know this, and many in the room do not. Let's start with, again, what is friction skin and
Yep.
where is it found? Just so we
Yep.
can understand what a fingerprint
Okay,
is.
I'm sorry. Okay, so back to those ridges. So your hand has ridges. So let's just use this as an example. Okay. So a cross section of your skin is going to look like that. These being the ridges, these being the furrows. Okay, can I erase this?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone sees that? Okay, the ridges and the furrows. Now, the top of those ridges, if you were to look down on it, let's say it looks like this. The top of the ridges have, those are pores, those are supposed to be circles. Okay, those pores secrete oil. That oil is basically 99% water. That 1% of oil and whatever else has like 300 different compounds in it, way above my pay grade. So that oil comes out and it covers the ridges. So the whole ridge essentially is coated in that oil. Now when you put down your hand or something, sometimes you will leave a representation of that ridge because it's coated in oil and the oil is transferred onto the surface. Okay? Now can you erase that for me? Now I'm just going to use just lines to represent the ridges now. So okay, so now let's say that's a representation of the ridges that were put down. So each of those lines represents the top of the ridge where oil is coated. The pores would be on top of those lines. Now these are considered minutia or events, okay? So that'd be like a bifurcation. That's one event. An ending ridge, another ending ridge. This would be either two bifurcations or one enclosure. I'm going too fast, sorry. And an ending ridge. So it's groupings of these events or minutia that constitute a fingerprint. So when you look at when I look at a fingerprint and I see, can you erase that again?
Do you want that?
Perfect. So this is also an example of different patterns, but for the casework I did on this, you don't even need to worry about this. Keep in mind there's nothing complicated about fingerprint work. There really isn't. It's simple. Okay, so these lines are most likely the ridges. Over on the right, over here, you can see the holes on top of the lines, which would be the pores. So these events, here, 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 all over the place, are events. And it's these groupings that make up a fingerprint. They're the individualization of a person with this pattern, as we all know.
Can I just back you up one moment?
Sure.
I just want to understand what you call the ridge detail or ridges that you find on skin in certain areas, friction skin. Just to clarify, where is that found on the human body? What parts of the body?
I think I said that before, the bottoms of your feet and the palm side of your hands.
Okay, so palms of your hands, not on the backs of your hands, but the palm
Nope,
side.
the palm side of your hands, the bottom of your feet.
And the bottom of the feet. And relative to your training experience and your reading of the literature in the field, is there an opinion as to whether or not individuals, when they are formed in utero, have uniqueness relative to the friction ridge skin on their palms and hands?
Yeah, well, I was just getting the individual out of it. Yeah, so the first 8 to 12 weeks, I think, of gestation, you have your fingerprints. They're permanent and lasting. Barring damage or disease, your fingerprints will always be the same.
And in fact, are you aware of whether or not even identical twins who have the same genetic material will sometimes have different fingerprints?
Sure.
They will have different
They will,
fingerprints.
yeah, not sometimes.
They
Yeah,
always-
no two people have ever been found to possess the same fingerprints. And that's being tested all the time, millions of times. I think there's like 500 million prints in the APHIS database. Those computers, people are constantly looking. And although erroneous identifications have been made, no two fingerprints have ever been found to be the same. So until they are, it's a lock science.
Now, Trooper Lord, I think you've explained what a fingerprint is, and you're still describing that now. What is meant by the term latent print?
Latent is just one type of fingerprint that's not readily visible to the eye. So if you see something, you don't see anything on it initially, that's not mean there's not a fingerprint on it.
And now, Trooper, I think you began to talk about this a little bit. What are some of the factors that determine whether or not a fingerprint or a latent print would be left on a surface? Meaning, can you talk a little bit about physiological issues as well as environmental issues that would
Sure, well, the
indicate whether or
substrate,
not-
the surface has everything to do with it. Some people perspire more, sometimes your hands are dry, sometimes your hands are, clammy or wet. That's basically the oils in your hand coming out at different rates. So somebody that has very, very dry hands and touches something, more apt not to leave a fingerprint.
And on the other side, if somebody's very sweaty, are they likely to leave a fingerprint?
They are, yes.
They are likely if they're very
If
sweaty?
they're very sweaty, their pores are more likely to leave a fingerprint, yes. It could also be distorted if they're overly, and it depends on the amount of pressure they're putting down, because of the pressure on the ridges. I said the ridges were coated with oil, something called deposition pressure. It's a high-speed word, it just means how hard you push down. It can force that oil into the furrows, into the low parts.
And Trooper, are there certain surfaces that are more conducive for accepting identifiable ridge detail for fingerprint analysis?
Absolutely. A lot of things with law, a high rate would be like a compact disc is a fantastic surface, glass, very smooth. It's not dirty, it's clean, really receptive to friction ridge. Rocks, handguns, like in this case, very low percentage.
Handguns are very low percentage?
Yeah, handguns have a lot of very few flat surfaces, so obviously you're putting your finger on it, so you need to collect, back to this, you need to collect a decent amount of detail in order to get enough for comparison purposes. So you need ideally get a wider surface. The material handguns are made of to prevent rusting and stuff is not conducive to fingerprints. I'm not 100% sure why. It's usually not a smooth surface. It's usually rougher to prevent corrosion. There was actually a company, I think, called Intratec back in the 90s that actually advertised, however immoral this is, that their fingerprints are fingerprint resistant. But they didn't do anything special to their guns. It was just inherently.
Do you have any sense as to percentage-wise how many firearms will usually have usable, identifiable prints?
Yeah, I've been out of the unit since 2015, like I said. The latest reading, 3 to 5% of guns processed yield usable fingerprints. Now, that's not to be said, not friction ridge. There could be 2 or 3 lines or more of friction ridge on it, but not enough for comparison purposes.
So for comparison purposes, sir, I think you mentioned individualization. Can you talk a little bit about the comparison process, meaning is there a point where you can do comparisons and either include or exclude somebody as a source of a latent print?
Yes. So if I process something, Can I speak to this case?
Sure, yes.
So in this case, I process the handgun. So you unwrap it out of the envelope, you take a picture of it, you look at it, basically looking for friction ridge. I don't see anything, so there still could be a latent print because it's not readily visible to the eye. So then I process the gun. In this case, I fumed it, put it into a big fumer. You fume it with cyanoacrylate, which is super glue. Take it out, look at it again. If you still don't see enough friction ridge to go forward with it, you'll dye it, which I did in this case. You just spray a dye on it, which adheres better to it, and then you look at it with a light that has different frequencies.
And although you didn't do it in this case, are there other methods to process items for possible latent prints depending on what the surface is?
The circumstances, the surfaces, all can change how you process something. But that process that I did is, in my opinion, the best. And to back up a little bit, the 3 to 5% results studied on usable fingerprints off handguns, that has not been my personal experience. I've processed hundreds of handguns and rifles and everything else, and I don't think I got even 3%.
You've had, in your personal
I've had
experience,
less, right, personally. I didn't keep track, but I mean, if I got a usable fingerprint off of a firearm, as nerdy as it is, that was a good day.
And what about permanence of fingerprints? In other words, are there environmental factors that determine whether or not a fingerprint is left on something?
Let me back up. You're going too fast for me. So back to the handguns and fingerprints. We were saying there weren't a lot of flat surfaces on the handgun. The surface is not receptive to fingerprints. Handguns you clean all the time. If you want to use them, you have to clean them. That usually takes the fingerprints or damages them or removes them, most likely. The way people handle handguns, putting them in holsters, under mattresses, under car seats, all that stuff reduces the results of fingerprints on handguns. Now, what was your question?
What about things like humidity or environmental conditions?
Yeah, sure. Humidity, if it's outside in the rain, if the person has gloves on, if it's dirty, sometimes if like a dirty counter and you touch it, you take your hand away, and you see a perfect mark of your hand or a finger, that doesn't mean there's a fingerprint there, because if it was dirty, that friction ridge, that oil landed on the dust and just took it away. So,
And Trooper, I think you touched upon this, but just to finalize the point you're making, what is required though for what's called an individualization of a latent print to a known print?
okay, so let's say I process something and then I'm analyzing it, I look at it, and I get a good portion like this of detail. I'm going to count the events that we were talking about earlier. I've never individualized anything with fewer than 8 points, 8 events that I could match up to somebody. So if I process something and look at it and I have 2 friction ridge lines like this, there's nothing I can do with it. I cannot use it. Nobody can. So I need detail.
And not just individualization. If you have enough detail, can you exclude somebody as a source of a latent print?
If I have enough detail and I have a 10 print card of that portion of friction ridge skin, does that make sense? So if I have enough detail and I have a representation of that section of skin, then yes.
Now, Trooper, you indicated that in this particular case, you did some casework processing both a firearm and some ammunition. Is that correct?
3 bullets, I believe.
And I believe, Trooper, you indicated that your first step prior to processing would be to photograph the items. Is that correct?
But yeah, take it out of the package it's in. It's usually taped.
May I approach the witness, Ron?
You may.
May I approach, Ron?
Exhibit 212 A, B, and C, so that it's clear the photographs of the envelope relate to the purported handgun.
Trooper, what's been, I'm sorry. Trooper, placing Exhibit 212A on the screen.
Okay.
First, that's your handwriting down here, sir. Those are your initials, SML.
Yes.
And this in which the items were contained, is that correct?
Correct.
I'm just showing you an envelope. Looking at Exhibit 212A, do you recognize the envelope?
It looks the same, has the same numbers, has
That-
my initials on it.
And is that the envelope in which the firearm and the 3 spent bullets contained within a plastic bag were submitted to you, sir?
Yes.
Perhaps at the envelope, the entry as 212D.
I'm sorry. The photographs, weren't they marked A, B, and C?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're asking that this be marked what?
212D or 213.
Why don't we make it 213?
And Trooper placing Exhibit 212B on the screen. Is that a photograph taken by you of the back side of the envelope?
Yes.
When that envelope was submitted to you at the crime scene services unit of the Massachusetts State Police, it was sealed as we see in this photograph?
Correct. When they come in prior to being opened, it's processed, they have red tape. This was at the time, they've since changed that. And then when you were done processing it, you would seal it up with yellow tape, put evidence tape across it, sign it, or initial it and date it.
So when you received it, it was sealed as we see in the photographs?
Exactly.
And placing on the screen what's been entered as exhibit number 212C. Tell us what we see in this photograph that you took.
It's the handgun and the 3 rounds that I processed,
And
along with the bag that it came in.
so what we see in this exhibit 212C, does that contain all of the items that were contained within that envelope that's just been introduced as exhibit number 213?
Yes.
And the contents included what appears to be a plastic Massachusetts State Police evidence bag,
Yes.
3 live rounds,
Yes.
and a revolver, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Trooper Lord, you indicated already the process in which you analyzed these 4 total items, is that correct?
Correct.
And I think you started off by talking about basically using heated up super glue, is that right?
Right. You vaporize it and it adheres to the evidence.
And just to describe for the jurors how that's done, is there some type of tank or what is that?
Yep. As I stated before, it's a large tank. It kind of looks like a closet with glass walls. You open the big door, you put in the super glue, the evidence, and water for humidity control. It runs for approximately 45 minutes, and that's it.
And when you took the, well, let me back up one moment.
Sure.
Prior to putting it into the fuming tank, I think you testified that you did a visual examination of the item.
Of course.
And you found no ridge detail during the visual
I don't
examination.
recall if I did see ridge detail, and I would have taken a picture of it if it would look like it was sufficient before I proceeded. If it had enough detail that I might be able to use it, I wouldn't go any further because I wouldn't want to risk destroying it. But that didn't happen in this case.
And then after you took it out of the fuming tank, you indicated that you applied some type of dye.
Right.
And
So I look at it again when I take it out of the fumer. If I still don't see anything or I don't see enough to go forward with it, I spray dye on it.
And after spraying dye, and also obviously after it's fumed, did you see any level of ridge detail?
No, you spray the dye on it, and then you have to dry it, and then you bring it into a dark room, and there's a light in there that they use, or that we used to use for with different frequencies, and you just look at the evidence, and it kind of highlights with the dye adhere to the super glue.
And what was the result of the processing that you've just described?
I found friction ridge on the handgun, and the bullets I treated as one item. So I found friction ridge on at least one of the bullets and the handgun, but it was not enough friction ridge to move forward with. So there were those lines we talked about, but not enough of them to do anything with.
And when you say not enough to do anything with, placing exhibit II back on the screen, what are you talking about if you could show us?
Okay, so any line, even if it's one simple line, if there's this much on that evidence, then I call it LQQ, which means lacks quality and quantity of friction ridge detail for comparison purposes, meaning there's just not enough information for me to compare to somebody else or eliminate somebody else. There just isn't enough on there. So it was touched by somebody, but that's all I can say.
So in layman's terms, you found lines, but not to the level of detail that we see in exhibit or in identification II, where you could make any further conclusions.
Exactly.
Now, following your processing of the item, where does the firearm go to next?
After I'm completely done with it, I'm going to leave it on under the light, most likely, cover it up, and then it needs to be verified. The scientific method we use calls the ACV methodology. You analyze, compare, evaluate, and then verify. So back to the first step, which is analyze. I didn't get further than that. But it's not required in that methodology, but the state police does verify the analysis. So I need to call in another expert to come look at it to verify my conclusion on that evidence.
So you have to call in another latent print examiner from the Massachusetts State Police to look at the item to see whether he or she had the same conclusion you did.
Exactly.
And did you photograph the level of the area of ridge detail that you saw?
No, when something's LQQ, it lacks quality and quantity of detail, we don't photograph it. It would be an illogical policy. The evidence is fumed, that secures the friction ridge on there. So barring somebody trying to take it off, that evidence is going to remain on the item. It would be completely impractical for us to photograph all friction ridge that we find. I mean, in a case like this, it sounds like it might make sense, but imagine I process a house for B&E or something. You're talking about a lot of friction ridge. For me to stop, photo, itemize, collect that data would be, our work would slow down 1,000-fold, and we would not get any improvement. We would not find more, usable fingerprints. So it would be an illogical policy.
And Trooper, what was your opinion to a reasonable degree of latent print examiner certainty as to whether or not that level of ridge detail you saw, whether or not it could be taken further to include or exclude anybody?
I guarantee you it can be taken further. You will not hear any expert that disagrees with my analysis on this.
Now, Trooper, does the gun, this particular item, did it go to your unit first before being test fired by a ballistician or a firearms examiner?
Yes.
And after you completed your work, did you seal that item up and forward it to the firearms analysis unit of the Massachusetts State Police?
I don't forward it. I seal it up. Like I said, I tape it, I initial it, I date it, and it goes back to evidence control. After that.
And have you had an opportunity to observe the firearms analysis unit of the State Police firing the test firing the weapons?
No, I don't think I actually ever have.
And during your processing of the item, did you wear latex gloves?
I do, they don't.
The firearms analysis unit does not wear latex
No,
gloves?
to the best of my knowledge, they don't. They believe it's unsafe to have to wear that when they're firing a firearm.
So it's possible that the firearms analysis unit troopers could...
Sustained.
So you're indicating that the firearms analysis unit troopers will then fire the weapon without gloves?
Objection, Judge. This weapon is the question.
If that's what you know to be the practice, you may testify.
To the best of my knowledge, the ballistics troopers do not wear gloves when they test fire these weapons.
And is that part of the reason why the latent print analysis is done first?
Yes.
Thank you, Trooper. I have no further questions.
Again, may I see exhibit 207, please? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Good morning, Trooper,
Morning.
ex-Trooper Lord, right?
No, I'm
Good morning.
still a trooper. I'm just not in
You're
crime
still a
scene
trooper,
anymore.
okay.
Yeah.
You retired when?
Not yet, unless you know something I don't.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Just make sure you're with us. So that you have access to your file, correct?
I can get access to it.
Well,
I have a copy of my report.
Okay. And before you do your report, when you're in the laboratory to look at the fingerprints, to try to get fingerprints, you
What
also...
When I'm looking at what fingerprints?
When you're in the laboratory trying to get fingerprints,
Okay.
you also fill out a note form, a worksheet, don't you?
I fill out a processing sheet, yes.
Okay, and on that processing sheet, you would note for this specific gun and cartridges exactly where you were trying to take a look at, to try to get friction-ridge detail, as you call it, or fingerprints.
Repeat that question?
You would note on that processing card where on the gun and cartridges you were looking for, correct?
No, the pitch, I look everywhere for it.
You look everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Now, when
It
you
is.
found, after you did your super glue process, and you found friction ridge detail, it's your testimony you don't take a picture of that, correct?
That wasn't my testimony. My testimony was after I dyed it and looked at it, I found friction ridge.
And that's my question to you. After you dyed it,
Mm-hmm.
you don't take a picture of that, correct?
I take a picture of it if it's what we call SQQ, if it has sufficient quality and quantity of detail to move forward
But you
with.
do
It-
note on your workshop where the friction ridge detail would be on the item, correct?
I note it if it's SQQ. So I would draw, do you want to see a copy of the processing sheet? It might be better for the jury.
Do you have no, to answer my question, do you have the processing sheet with you?
I have a copy of it.
Okay, may I see that, please?
Sure.
Okay, Your Honor, may I have a smart card, please?
Let me see you at sidebar for a moment.
Stated that you noted on there exactly where you found the friction ridge detail on the gun.
Not say that.
Did you put where you found the friction ridge detail on the gun?
Repeat that, please?
Did you put on that processing sheet where you found the friction ridge detail on the gun?
No.
Where did you put where you found the friction ridge detail? Where did you note it?
On my report.
Now, your report says that you found friction ridge detail. My question to you, sir, is on what parts of the gun did you find friction ridge detail?
I don't recall. It was 5 years ago.
So you did not make any notation anywhere in your file as to where the friction ridge detail was, correct?
Correct. I followed our procedure.
Now, except that when you come here to court today, you can't remember where it was, correct?
It was 5 years ago. Absolutely not.
Can I see the gun, please? 206. Now, this is the gun that you processed. It's already been marked in evidence as 206, right?
Okay.
Okay. Now, how many smooth parts of this gun are there?
Oh, it's generally pitted, but it's a smooth gun. Kind of looks, it's shiny,
Silver
silverish, yes.
and shiny, correct? And then the grips are pretty much used, correct?
It does look worn, yeah.
All right. And usually on a gun, on grips, they're crosshatched. Does this one kind of has some faint crosshatching, correct?
There's faint cross-hatching on that. I don't know what guns usually have.
So this has a more smooth surface on the grips, correct? Than you normally see.
It's textured.
Well, do you normally see one this crosshatch with the crosshatching so far down?
I wouldn't even answer that. I don't know what I normally see.
Well, how many guns have you processed?
A lot.
And the crosshatching on the grip of the gun is so that the holder or the shooter can get a better bearing on it, correct?
Yeah, I can't hear you when you turn your back and walk away.
I apologize. The crosshatching on the grips of the gun is so that the holder or shooter can get a better grip on the gun, correct?
You're asking me if the grip is for holding?
Yes.
Yes, the grip on a gun is for holding it.
Right, and when you have cross-hatching, it's a lot more difficult usually to get prints, correct?
It's going to depend on the grip and the surface. I can't answer that question.
Well, when you have something that's indented with lines and not smooth, is it harder to get fingerprints?
If something is smooth, it's easier to get fingerprints than if it has deep.
And that's what you
groove.
testified to. You said that certain surfaces, such as glass, are ideal for fingerprints, correct?
I'm going to ask you to stop interrupting me. You ask me a question and you interrupt me.
I'm sorry, sir. Please finish your answer.
It's easier to get something off of a smooth surface than a surface that has pits, yes.
Okay. And usually a gun on a grip will have pits, correct?
I don't know. What are pits?
Will have cross-hatching, correct?
I don't know if handguns usually have cross-hatching on the handguard. I
How
can't
many
answer
revolvers have you said that you've processed over your years?
that. I would say hundreds would be a safe bet.
And how many?
I couldn't tell you how long the barrels are. I couldn't tell you what the grips are like. These are just things I don't pay attention to. Yes, sir.
But you do know the grips are crosshatched, correct?
I know that some grips are cross-hatched.
Okay. And you can see that these grips have cross-hatching that's been worn away on this gun, on the
Yes.
206, correct?
Yes.
All right. The jury can see that also, right? If you can see it.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, let me show you Exhibit 207. I think you stated to Mr. Hagan you looked at cartridges, bullets.
Correct.
All right. Can you tell us whether these are the two cartridges and bullets you looked at?
I believe there was 3.
3.
I believe so.
And in fact, your report indicates there were 3, correct?
I believe so.
Do you know why there's only 2 bullets in that plastic envelope?
No.
Did anyone tell you why there was 2 bullets in that envelope as opposed to 3?
No.
Did you ever look at the original reports from Trooper Aten and Winters indicating how many cartridges were taken from the trunk of the car?
No, I didn't even know. I don't know. I have no idea. I know the gun came from the barracks in Springfield. That's all I know.
Okay. All right. Now, after you did the examination and the super gluing, you looked at the gun, correct?
And the dyeing, yes.
Yes. And then you also did the examination and the super gluing, and you looked at the cartridges, correct?
Correct.
And then when you looked at the cartridges, because of the dyeing, you had like a greenish yellow light, fluorescent light because of the dyeing, correct?
Not because of the dyeing, but you look at it with a light that has different wavelengths.
It has different wavelengths. And
Right.
the dyeing does leave some indication that a gun has been tested for fingerprints, correct?
Yes.
And as a matter of fact,
Wait. Ask that question one more time.
the gun does leave some indication after you finish processing it that it has been processed for fingerprints because the dye is still on the gun, correct?
Yeah, you could see it with a light. You might not be able to see the dye with just the naked eye, but with a light you can tell. Yeah.
But somebody looking for it to see if it's been processed for fingerprints can look, correct?
I would say, yeah.
Okay. And you know from being part of this ASCLAD, as you indicated, a certified lab, that you're trying to also not only look for evidence, but preserve evidence, correct?
By fuming it, you mean? By fuming the gun?
Are you looking for evidence and trying to preserve it while you're looking for it?
I'm not trying to destroy any evidence that might be on the gun. It still has to go to ballistics and to DNA.
And it may have to come to court.
Sure.
Okay? So you don't want to add anything to the gun, right? You don't want to add any fingerprints when you're testing.
No, I don't.
And you don't want to take anything away.
Sure.
That's like a basic rule in crime scene processing, correct?
I'd say that's a very fair statement.
And it's a basic rule when you're processing a gun or cartridges, correct?
For me, yes.
Well, you've taken a lot of courses. In crime scene processing, you know that generally, correct? You don't want to add or subtract to any evidence.
Well, we spoke earlier about ballistics, not wearing gloves. But as far as my participation, yes, I certainly don't want to add or take away any fingerprints.
Now, after you did all this dyeing and processing, I think you also indicated at one point, when you were talking to Mr. Hagan, that when you want to use a gun, it has to be cleaned all the time, correct?
I'd say it's a common thing. That's what I said. It's clean a gun.
Quote, if you
to
want
work.
to use it, has to be cleaned all the time, correct?
Sure.
Because guns jam, correct?
They do.
And you know that as a state trooper that revolvers can jam, correct?
I believe any handgun can jam.
Any handgun can jam, and that's why you clean it all the time.
That's why
correct?
I clean mine, yeah.
Okay, but this gun did have what you call friction ridge detail, right?
Correct.
And friction ridge detail is a fancy word for saying part of a fingerprint.
Sure.
All right, and can you tell us exactly how many parts of the fingerprint it had?
No.
Because you didn't make any notes on that, did you?
No.
All right, so when you say you looked for a fingerprint to exclude somebody, we have no way here today to verify that because you didn't take a photo of that, correct?
Well, back up a little bit to what you just said. I wasn't trying to exclude anybody with this case. I was given the gun and told to process it for fingerprints.
All
That's
right,
all I did.
but that's not my question to you. We don't have any documentation by a photograph of what you saw, correct?
Not from me, correct.
Okay.
It's not our policy.
So all we can say is that you said we can't exclude anybody by the partial fingerprints that you found on the gun and cartridges, correct?
No, I mean, you have access to it, and like I said, when I fume it, it preserves a friction ridge very well. So anybody can inspect it should be able to see the exact same friction ridge that I saw.
Okay, so are you aware, sir, that as of February 2015, there were no friction ridge detail?
No, if you know that to be the case, you may answer that.
Judge, may I finish the question? I don't think I finished it, though. Are you aware as of February 2015, there were no friction ridge details on that gun?
I was not aware of that, no.
February of 2015.
Correct.
You don't know that.
No, I would have to see the gun. I mean, that's just what you're saying.
So you're not aware that as of February 25th, 2015, there were no friction ridge details on the cartridges?
I don't know that to be true. I don't know it not. I mean,
You don't know one way or another,
exactly.
but all you know is that you were trying to make sure those were preserved.
When I analyzed that gun and those rounds, there were friction ridge on it, albeit minute, possibly, but it was friction ridge on it.
Okay, so, and with all this testimony, you did not find Aaron Hernandez fingerprints on that gun, correct?
There wasn't enough detail to say it's anybody's or exclude anybody. There was just friction ridge on it. Somebody touched it. I cannot say who it was.
And there wasn't enough detail to say who touched the cartridges where you found the friction ridge detail, correct?
Exactly.
Now, you said you weren't looking to include or exclude just to see what you had, and then you go from there, right?
Exactly.
And then if you do have enough friction ridge detail, you put it into something, you said APHIS?
Correct.
Then that's an acronym for what?
Automated fingerprint identification system.
And that has 500 million fingerprints in there?
I mean, I'm just going back from what I remember reading when I was in crime scene. There's
Well, that's what you told the
millions
jury.
of
It has about
fingerprints.
500 million fingerprints in there, correct?
Something like that.
And they're
yes.
computerized, correct?
Correct.
And so through some algorithm, the computer can determine if there's a possible match to a fingerprint, correct?
If I had enough friction ridge detail to submit, then yes, that's what I would do.
Okay. It wouldn't just rely on your judgment one way or another. You could be, if you found what you thought was an identification, you'd put it through the computer, and the computer can determine whether or not you were right or not.
No, if I just had the friction ridge detail and no suspects or anything to
Right.
compare it to, then I put it in the computer. If they have suspects, I would compare it to those 10 print cards, those known prints before I put it into
And
APHIS.
10 print card means something, a fingerprint card that has 10 fingerprints on it. That's what the 10
It
print
has
card is,
more,
right?
but it has more, but yeah.
Okay, but basically, that's what you're looking at when you say 10 print card.
It's a representation of your fingertips.
Okay. Now, going back to the fact that you said you couldn't exclude, you don't have any documentation that we could look at to determine whether or not an exclusion could be made.
Of course not.
Because you didn't save any, correct?
Right, I followed a procedure. I did not photograph the friction ridge I found that did not have sufficient quality and quantity of friction ridge detail.
But you didn't even save any notes to show where on the gun or cartridges you found this, correct?
Correct.
You don't know if it's on the crosshatched area, correct?
I don't know where it is.
You don't know if it's on the smooth areas.
No, you may have the question.
Sorry, go again.
You don't know if it's on the smooth areas.
I don't know where the friction ridge was on the gun, no.
Okay. Now, you also discussed to this jury something about how volatile or how fingerprints can degrade, correct?
Sure, if you left a fingerprint on a handgun and it was outside in the rain, that could diminish or remove the fingerprint.
And even if something is left outside with the air, a fingerprint can degrade, correct?
In certain environments, yes.
And it can start degrading depending on what type of fingerprint it is, immediately or not, right?
I couldn't tell you.
Well, you talked about fingerprints from the oil on your hand, right?
Right.
And there's also something called the fingerprint just from equine sweat, just from sweat on your hand, right?
I'm sorry?
Fingerprint from sweat on your hand, right?
It would be oil.
Do you have to have oil to have a fingerprint?
Yeah, to some degree, I would say you do.
Okay. Can you have a fingerprint just with sweat without the oil?
Yes, you could have anything like a patent or a plastic print.
Right, right. So that you can have a fingerprint without oil.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and it would be fair to say that a fingerprint that's in sweat would degrade much quicker, right?
Yes.
Because there's no oil there to degrade.
As opposed to blood. Well, no.
Now, I'm just talking about oil and sweat, the two items that, listen.
I don't know physically what sweat is composed of. I know that the oil is composed of mostly water, so it evaporates quickly.
So it evaporates quickly.
Right.
All right. Now, despite the fact that, but a fingerprint that could be, that have more oils on it could stay longer, right?
It sounds logical, but once again, I don't have the scientific background to answer that.
So you don't know the answer to that question.
If a fingerprint has more oil, will it last longer? No.
All you know is that from this gun and from these, you said 3 cartridges, correct?
I believe so. We had the picture up. I think it was three.
3 cartridges that no one could be identified, correct?
Exactly.
And no one, and that gun could not, through any fingerprint analysis, be linked to Aaron Hernandez. Through fingerprint
Possibly
analysis.
through fingerprint. Very good.
It could not be, correct?
No.
And that's all you know about?
Pretty much, yeah.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir, you redirect.
Only one question.
Sure.
Kenny Bodden asked you about putting it into the computer. Could you have put that level of rich detail you found in the computer?
Absolutely not. No.
So that level of rich detail could neither include nor exclude anyone.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
But Trooper Lord, there is a computer program, if you find enough, to try to find fingerprints, as opposed to you just looking at them, right?
Enough friction-rich detail?
Yes.
Correct.
Fingerprints has evolved to that stage, correct?
Fingerprint what? Has
That you
evolved?
can have a computer look at them to see.
If I found sufficient friction-ridge detail on any of that evidence, I could have put it into the computer.
And my
Yes.
question to you is, fingerprints have evolved to the stage that there are computers and algorithms to search for this evidence, this impression evidence.
If you submit enough quantity of friction-ridge detail.
I understand that, but
Okay.
there are, just a simple question, there are computer programs to deal with analyzing on a fingerprint, correct?
Yes, but not in this case.
It's not my question to you. There
Okay.
are computer programs that exist to analyze a fingerprint.
Yes.
And a fingerprint is impression evidence, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You may step down, please. Watch your step. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take our morning recess. We'll resume at 20 of.